Hello, I'm Samuel Novotny, and today the topic of this discussion are the Miranda warnings. These are the basic warnings given by officers when taking somebody into custody or arresting them. These rights are protected under the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution, and these rights are made up of four basic protections of the person being taken into custody. These were established after the Supreme Court case, Miranda v. Arizona, that changed the way that interrogations were handled in the United States. While Mr. Miranda was not found innocent in his case, the use of these rights has forever changed the system in America. These rights are basic protections under the Fifth Amendment, and there are four of them. The first is, you have the right to remain silent. The second is, anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. And the third, you have the right to an attorney. The fourth is, if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you. These rights help those being detained to know what they have the right to do during that process. Without these rights, those who are arrested could potentially share incriminating information that they may regret sharing once their trial comes. The first Miranda right is the right to remain silent, and is probably the most familiar right to most Americans. This right tells you that it is not necessary to talk to any police officers or interrogators while you are detained. This means that any questions asked do not need to be answered, and there can be no discrimination against somebody because they choose not to speak, meaning that it cannot be assumed that somebody is guilty because they will not talk, because it is their right to remain silent. This leads into the second right, as they are connected in terms of what part of an interrogation they pertain to. The second Miranda right is that anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. This means that if someone were to say something and choose not to remain silent, they are giving those words out to potentially be used against them on trial. This also means that although the right to remain silent is there, it does not protect their speech. So these two rights together are great to prevent people from saying something they would regret saying, but it also tells them that it will be used against them if they do say it. So if they say something, it is their own fault for giving themselves away. The third Miranda right says you have the right to an attorney, which means that anybody under a trial can have an attorney no matter who they are or the crime they commit. This protects people who do not know if they have an attorney or may potentially enter a trial alone because they did not realize they could have the help of an attorney. While this may be a rare occurrence, it is still something that is protected under the Fifth Amendment, and it has to be told to all people who are arrested so they do not claim they were told that they did not have that option to have an attorney. The fourth and final Miranda right is if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you. This right gives all people who want an attorney the right to one, no matter if they have the money for one or not, making all people in court equal in their opportunity to defend themselves. This makes everyone equal because if everybody has a right to an attorney, no matter if they can afford it, then everybody has equal representation in court and can fight their cases to the best of their ability. This protects people who cannot afford attorneys from being unprepared in court and losing because they are not prepared with an attorney. This trial is very complex, so this will give you a pretrial overall argument for each side. The trial of Miranda v. Arizona started with the arrest of Miranda, which led to his investigation. This is what Miranda would base his defense with, as he and his side claimed that he was rejected counsel in his initial trial, and that violated his Sixth Amendment rights. The side of Arizona basically had nothing to say besides that what they did to get this evidence from Miranda was completely legal, and they did not violate the Constitution. They practically just said that they were innocent and whatever Miranda said was wrong and should not be believed. This all starts with the arrest of Ernesto Miranda, who was arrested at his home on March 13, 1963. 14 days later, on March 27th, he was denied legal representation on a preliminary hearing, and counsel objected to the use of his signed confession. But the objection was denied. On June 12th of that year, he was convicted of rape and kidnapping, and on that same day, he appealed to the Arizona State Supreme Court, but the court upheld his conviction, so he appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. This is where the case originated from, but it definitely was not done, as this was really only the beginning. Leading up to the Supreme Court case, on January 23, 1966, two of Miranda's counsels, John J. Flynn and John P. Frank, submit an appeal to the Supreme Court, claiming that Miranda's Sixth Amendment right to counsel was violated. But 2 weeks later, Arizona responded by saying these statements were not true and the rights were not violated. This case came before the Supreme Court on February 28, 1966, and took longer than expected because of numerous cases against Arizona in regards to violation of the Sixth Amendment. Finally, Miranda won on a 5-4 vote, proving that his signature and confession could not be used against him in court. However, this did not make him free, as other testimonies on another trial following the Supreme Court case proved him guilty for his original charges. The Fifth Amendment was needed to complete this Supreme Court case, although this is not what Miranda and his team initially argued for. Miranda used the Sixth Amendment for reasoning as to why Arizona was wrong, but the judges made their decision based on the Fifth Amendment. This shows that it was not his right to counsel that mattered most, but his right to those Miranda rights. This quote says, "Those who take the Fifth under oath are normally invoking the privilege against self-incrimination. Under current precedents, they can invoke that privilege in other situations as well." This means that one part of the Fifth Amendment is to plead the Fifth, which also pertains to Miranda rights, making these rights the same things that Miranda was not given before his interrogation. The aftermath of what happened with the Miranda v. Arizona case is what made the case so important. This case establishes the Miranda rights, the full rights spoken by police officers to those who are detained. This case changes the way that interrogations can happen, because now officers cannot force confessions out of people in an interrogation. They must give them their right, meaning if they do not want to speak, they do not have to. And this quote says, "Most importantly, the court affirmed the constitutional right of a person in custodial police interrogation to remain silent, enshrined in the Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination." This means that the most important part of this case is protecting the rights of those in interrogation under the Fifth Amendment. As with many aspects of the government, there are pros and cons to the Miranda warnings. Some pros are that they have helped to broaden people's understanding of their rights. Another pro is that it stopped the interrogation process, like with what happened to Ernesto Miranda. People could no longer be forced into a confession like this, as they are given the right to silence. The cons are that most Miranda warnings are spoken in English, which hinders non-English speakers' ability to know their rights, and that Miranda warnings are not always given, even if they are supposed to be. The issue with the warnings being spoken in English is that besides English, a majority of Americans speak Spanish. As the graph shows, 35.5 million people speak Spanish while living in America. In a study that called 28 states about any specific Miranda warnings besides the basic 4, a total of 385 were in English, while only 51 were in Spanish, showing a huge language discrepancy. In conclusion, Ernesto Miranda brought to light the need for these warnings, but in the end, he was still found guilty. These 4 warnings are basic rights to protect those who are being detained by the police, and these rights are protecting the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. The Supreme Court case Miranda v. Arizona was a landmark case that led to the use of these warnings, and although Miranda did still end up in jail, his impact was still great for the American judicial system. Although there may be bad parts to these warnings, in general, the good overrules the bad, and the nation is better off with them in place. Citations. The first is a JSTOR citation from an article about the overall idea of the Miranda warnings, and I use a quote that talks about the right to remain silent and more about the Fifth Amendment. The second is another JSTOR citation, and this one talks about the language of the warnings, and I specifically looked at a study about additional warnings in different languages. The third citation is out of the book for the class. I used a quote about the right to remain silent and the Fifth Amendment being important to these warnings. The fourth citation is from the Library of Congress, and it gave me a good timeline of the events that led to the court case and what happened from beginning to end for Miranda. The fifth is an article from a website that told me exactly what the rights are and when they are used. And the sixth comes from uscourts.gov, and it helped me to understand more about the decision leading up to the Supreme Court case and some other courses similar to Miranda v. Arizona. The seventh and final citation gave me specific information about the case, and I mostly used it to determine the way each side was thinking when arguing their case. Thanks.